Waffle Doug. Waffle Doug. Those are the words that I heard when I realized I was in love with this album by Squid, Cowards. Let me explain. So every Sunday, I usually make pancakes or waffles or French toast or Dutch babies. It's kind of my thing. But we're having sort of a special waffle party, real Dylan G situation. And my wife, she makes these amazing Liège pancakes. If you've never had them, you have to make them the day before with yeast, and it takes a long time, and you have to refrigerate the batter. And so she said, Skye, when you do your video tomorrow morning, because she's sleeping and my two babies are sleeping and my teenager's sleeping and my two dogs are sleeping, when you make your video and everyone's sleeping, you have to remember to take out the waffle dough. And so I was like, well, where am I going to even, how am I going to remember this? How am I not going to forget? I'm just going to be thinking about this album. So in my notes app, where I write down my notes for every album, I wrote Waffle Doug, right above Squid, Cowards. Now, I should have written dough. I don't know. I guess I was in a rush. And it was this morning when I listened to the album again. I get ready. I have my coffee. I walk the dogs. I clear the snow from the path. I do all that stuff while listening to the album I'm about to review. And it was while seeing the word Waffle Doug on probably my fifth or sixth listen, probably my third, very close listen this morning, I realized, oh my God, I love this album. I didn't know. I've always liked it. I've always appreciated it. I always knew it met the criteria for me to talk about it and evaluate it and share my thoughts with you. But it was really only this morning that I realized I loved it. And when it takes me a while to love an album, that's usually a deeper kind of love than when I first enjoy it. It's part of what makes what I think a really great artist is when they give you what they want, and what they want is what you need. And so it wasn't what you wanted, but it ended up being what you needed. And I've been consulting Lyric Genius, where they often have good clips of interviews from bands. And Ollie, who I guess is the name of the singer and drummer. As a drummer myself, I really appreciate that. Very few people can play drums and sing at the same time. And the first names you think of are Phil Collins and Don Henley. Man, they suck. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry, British people. I didn't. And Californians. I'm sorry to both of you, but come on now. So, it's very nice as a drummer to have someone represent like that. And Dave Grohl. Dave Grohl kind of sucks too. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm going after it. I'm starting right off the video getting people upset today. I apologize. Anyways, he said in one of his interviews about one of the tracks that it's one of his favorites because, quote, if you dropped into the middle of the track and showed it to a Squid fan, they might not think it's Squid. That's always a really exciting prospect for anyone listening to a band they are a fan of. And I think that's really true. And I think that's what they've done, and this is their third album. And I think they're 3 for 3. I think Oh Monolith is different enough from Bright Green Field that it sounds like a different band. I mean, there's a lot of similarity, but there's a huge difference to it. And I have to admit, I don't think I listened to Oh Monolith enough to have my Waffle Doug moment because I re-listened to it this morning and I was like, oh, wait a minute. I like that album. I said positive things about it, but I didn't love it. And I listened to it this morning and I think I love it. And I mean, I've always really liked Squid. I think I've always loved Squid. But I think with their last album, I kind of drifted off. You're probably with me. If you're watching this, you're probably a fan of the whole British post-punk scene, the post-Brexit, post-Lexit, whatever. How many prime ministers you guys got over there? Also asking for a friend. How do you replace the leader of your country? How do things get so chaotic that you could just another president arrives? Because let me tell you, I'm clowning, but I'm not. That sounds like a great system. Anyways, they really are 3 for 3. But I will tell you this. As a little treat, at the very end of this video, I will give you the name of a band that makes very sort of bright green field Squid-like music. And if you like the old Squid, there's no lack of bands that make music like it. And I guarantee you, only one of you watching has ever heard of this band, okay? I promise you. So stay tuned. It's going to be a wild recommendation. Let's see if we can get that band some more attention. Thank you for auditing the Always Positive New Music Review Show, hosted by a French professor who I thought I preferred their initial album style. I thought, but this morning with my Waffle Doug moment, I don't think so. I think I really enjoy this. And what happens is when you change things around so much, when you are not just making, a sequel to your previous album, what you have is, and I'm going to sound pretentious, but hey, you're the one watching an album review by a French professor in a bathrobe. A bunch of albums become an oeuvre, however you want to pronounce it, a body of work. Like, with that much variation, it doesn't just become one thing, next thing, next thing. It has that more holistic feel where you have to look at a band from further back than just from taking a specific chunk and kind of studying it as being exemplary. This album in particular is not overly precious. Now, it's fascinating because we have the sort of the big three, the unofficial big three of the post-punk scene. Human beings like to categorize. I'm going to do that. I'm going to be leaving out some bands that you're going to tell me in the comments, bruh, Skye, thought you knew music. How could you say big three when you forgot, I don't know, Eyelid Might? Oh, their first EP was amazing. How could you forget them? You know what I'm saying? But Black Midi broke up, and then Jordy Griep went solo and really pushed the boundaries of his style and his approach, although not in a way that I think would lose his initial fans. I think Black Country New Road, based on some of the comments that I've seen, has annoyed a lot of their original fans, which makes me think like maybe they weren't like actual fans, because I don't mean to be a jerk, but their new music is great. It's just a little different, And here we have Squid breaking free again and making stuff that doesn't sound it. And I think one of the main things is that there's kind of a limitation to super mathematical, what I call timekeeper rock. Timekeeper rock it's where you sit there and you're changing from 6/8 to 11/7 and 5/2, and the guitar's playing 5/8 and the drums are playing 4/4, but then there's percussion, and then you switch into another section. All that kind of stuff. It's great. It's awesome. It's very enjoyable when it's done well. It is very enjoyable when it's done well. When it's done poorly, it's dental surgery without enough anesthesia. I had that once in San Jose. Never go to a dentist who has a picture of his own car on the wall. That's my maxim for you today. But anyways, that kind of overly precious, tricky, timekeepery stuff, that's not really here. And I think a lot of the excitement for a lot of this scene was that we were getting a lot of people who went to the Conservatory of Music and who studied at the conservatory and were masters and virtuosos, and they were showing that off. But that doesn't always lead to great art. It doesn't always lead to bad art. It doesn't always lead to great art. And it might be that that's an unsustainable way of approaching music. And I don't mean to reduce it, but I mean that it's probably better that that's not where all of these artists still are right now, even if their fans are into it. So this album is not overly precious, not too tricky. There's a weirdness to it. I think what it is, the word I'm going to use is thinness. I don't know if there's usually 3 knobs, just basic. There's more knobs on a professional setup. And I know I'm using the word knob, and I'm talking to a partly British audience, and knob in English is slang for a wing wong, but I'm just going to keep using it. So, there's usually 3 knobs on a stereo. You have your high, your mid, and your bass. And there's a weird sound that comes out when you emphasize the mid. The bass is what usually people emphasize. They usually turn down the treble a little bit. But this kind of has some kind of thinness to it. And it has to be intentional because it's throughout much of the album. But then almost every song has these moments of insane warmth which then come in, usually by horns or strings, which just arrive unannounced, just pop up and are there. I think, because I'm a Gen Xer, all music eventually goes back. All rock and roll eventually goes back to what do I think of, how does it compare to Radiohead? And I think this is sort of a very moon-shape pooly style album where it's hard to get an initial take on. Moon-shaped pool has that kind of thinness that I'm talking about, a thinness that's often matched by a kind of lushness. And it might be what makes it a hard album to love instantly. and I mean, Moonshaped Pool is a hard album to love initially, but you eventually love it. I think the singer has a lot to do with this, Ollie, if I remember correctly. He's a lot less brash and sort of bratty on this project. I mean, when I think of Squid, I just think of that song GSK on their first album, on the GlaxoSmithKline. There's kind of that brashy. I didn't say it right. It doesn't matter. Less brash and bratty here. He's more kind of frail and wise. So that's I would say my spiritual take on the music. Less ornate, less timekeepery, less funky, a lot more kind of chill and these great moments of lushness. Now, as far as the themes go, this is part of the problem of being me. And part of the problem of being me, and part of the problem of being a music critic, is you get an idea and you do a terrible thing. So the difference between like doing your own research and actually doing research is whenever people say do your own research, they're telling you to look for things that tell you what you already think, right? Real scholars, real academics, try to find things that contradict what they believe. That's just the difference. In case you're wondering what it is, that's the difference between like an intellect and an idiot. No, idiot's a bad word. And a silly person, okay? So, when you are a music critic and you think you've picked up on a theme, and especially if it fits into a larger theme, you are going to try to, this door goes both ways, it all the way until it fits your theme. And you're just going to try to push it. So I was all ready. And already, like, the single was called Magnon, and the themes were very clearly about sort of like evil. So I was like, okay, great. I've been working on this whole theme that the early part of this decade, the post-punk bands were all obsessed with the nature of truth, which made sense because we were living in the post-truth era, whatever that meant. And then in the last couple of years, I've been really turned on to the fact. This is why I should edit. That's a weird thing to say. I found it really groovy. It was really far out, man. That it seemed to me it shifted from meditation on truth to meditation on humanity and its de-evolution. Okay? That we're sort of devolving into more tribal, less sophisticated, less evolved people. We are devolving through technology. And so, that's perfect for me. I love the band Devo, one of my favorites. I get to bring them up as much as I possibly can. That Viagra Boys album, at the end of the decade will probably be top 3 post-punk albums of the year. Of the decade. And I thought that's what this was going to be. And then it was called Cowardice. So I had this whole theory that, like, oh my God, yeah. Because if you look at the real problem that we have right now, it's that there's greed and cowardice. So greed is directing everybody, right? Everybody is just acting out of greed. They either want more power or more money, usually more power through more money. So all the evil that's happening in the world, and there's evil everywhere. There's always evil everywhere, but evil is having a really great time right now. Like that greed, that corruption takes over, and then the cowardice is not doing anything. That's the problem. It's the cowardice. It's the cowards that don't stand up to the greed. That's the problem. That's what's causing this downfall and this backwardsness. And that is a theme of the album, but it's not the theme. It's not actually a concept album. It's not like that Viagra Boys album. It's about a bunch of things. It is about the banality of evil, to the point where I almost went out and rebought Hannah Arendt because I don't know where my copy is. It is about that. It is about the many faces of evil, the many faces of cowardice. But it's also about being uncomfortable outside of your own habitus, outside of your own comfort zone. It's also like about body horror and gore and that weird, gross album cover, which, if it's not AI, it looks like AI with some kind of crustacean being held by a finger up close. It's like you're uncomfortable. So that where I wanted there to be just one unified theme, there's a bunch of themes which seem connected but are not entirely just one thing. As far as the production goes here, it's a 3-producer team, and that's also pretty exciting because I have gotten used to in a good way, used to, the sort of single producer for these rock bands, for these post-punk rock bands. But here we have Grace Banks, who I don't particularly know, Marta Salongi. Every single time I say her name, I think Solongi Bongi from Mario 64. If you know what I'm talking, if you know what I'm talking about, you're going to laugh. If you don't, I apologize. And she did the English Teacher album last year, late Black Midi, and then we have Dan Carey, who did some early Black Midi, a lot of the Fontaines DC, K Tempest, Wet Leg, Slow Tie, and the last Squid album. So it's interesting having all three of these producers here. I think that might be what makes it a hard album to get a real hold on, because it has so many different cooks in this kitchen. So let's get to the album. I'm not going to pick one song as a symbol, because I really think the whole thing just feels like a whole, and no one song represents everything, because there's actually a lot of stylistic difference throughout. If you like what you see, smash like bucket, subscribe. AVAA stands for awesome video as always. Let's talk about the song Crispy Skin. Okay, first question. When you hear the title Crispy Skin, do you A, get hungry, B, get repulsed? I think that's a good question. I personally get hungry. I love crispy skin. My wife, the Dr. and Mrs., she's very good at cooking all sorts of meat, and especially like duck. Man, when I have some duck with some crispy skin, that's wonderful. Jittery synths and these drums behind. Can I be silly with you? Okay, I'm going to be silly with you. The opening of this song sounds like crispy skin. It sounds like a frying pan with crispy skin at the edge. And then has this kind of shuffling sound, and the voice is speaking over this really heavy bass. It's really just a template, just a space for these words to come out. This great breakdown. There's a lot of dynamics in this album, but they're not big dynamics. Again, there's a real subtlety to this album. Again, I'm going to keep coming back to Moonshade Pool. I feel similar about that. Whereas, you sort of want the great big dynamics, but they're very small dynamics here. This beautiful part with the guitar notes and the voice matching, and it builds in the back, and the guitar becomes kind of intimate and fun, talking about crispy skin, and it's something we crave. Is this going to be a meat is murder kind of situation where we're talking about, no. It turns out this guy just read a book called Cadaver Exquisito by Agustina Bazterrica, which means exquisite cadaver, which was actually the game that the surrealists used to play. You can play it with your friends. You take a piece of paper and you fold it into three, and one of them draws the feet, the other one draws the torso, and the other one draws the head. But you keep it a secret from each other what the other person drew. So, Dali and Breton, whatever, they would get together and they would make little cadavre exquis at dinner. Apparently it was translated into English as tender as the flesh, and it's about cannibals. So it turns out that's what this is actually about. It's about cannibalism, which means that when you were like me and you heard crispy skin, and you got kind of, we're actually talking about, human flesh. There is a quote in the song where it says, "Am I the bad one?" And I think this is on purpose. I think this is on purpose because it reminds me of the famous Mitchell and Webb sketch, a British comedy, Are We the Baddies? Am I the bad one? Are we the baddies? I think that's, if I can contradict myself and do the thing I said I'm not doing, maybe we could say that that's this idea of R&D evolution, that the cowardice is to ask yourself, am I the bad one? And come back with the answer, I don't know, maybe, I could be, I don't know. Am I the bad one? I can't quite tell. Again, all the comments, if I knew his last name, I'd call him by his last name. I'm not trying to insult him, but I've only ever seen him called Ollie. He talks about the chamber kind of feel to the record, piano and acoustic instruments. Evil acts have been normalized. Whether or not anyone could have such a strong moral compass to not indulge in things that are so widely normalized. So you see why I got so excited initially. I'm like, this is it. This is all going to fit the themes, but we're going to see. It's going to go away and go back to this theme. This back half of the song, it's so warm. Who would think that having three producers would produce. See, this is why you need to write a script, Skye, and not just have notes. Three producers can create such subtlety. And that's what we have. It's a very subtle, these guitars interlocking and the riffs going up and just a little tambourine, a little drum bit, and these horns come in. There's so much great stuff happening here. Next track is called Building 650. This is maybe more of your traditional Squid-like crunchy jam, the guitars and strings interlocking super guitars and strings. Where do these strings comes from? The guitars kind of like noodling around, sort of even almost like Doors-like. Apparently, these are lyrics about walking around in Japan and feeling lonely. See, this is what I'm talking about. This is this other theme. That it feels to me a lot of this is about like a young kid from Brighton. Oh, by the way, stay tuned to the end where I'll tell you what premier team I support now. Last time I talked about Squid, I became a Brighton supporter, but I've switched my allegiance. If you're interested, you better stay tuned to the end. And it's talking about like being in Tokyo, and the noble gas just powers the town, and that makes sense. Neon is a noble gas. I've been to Tokyo. I spent like a summer there. Don't go in the summer; it's too hot. It is way too hot. Anyways, beautiful place. But then there's this whole like other theme of murder and his friend Frank. And his friend Frank is a murderer. Like it seems like this could have just been sort of a nice kind of simple song, sort of a sweet song about feeling lost in Japan. But then he sort of always has to take it to this sort of dark murder, burn them in the basement style feel. But there's these breakdowns between verses with the strings and the guitars, and the way that the guitars and the voice are matching here. It's really fine. It's really, really fine work. I mean, fine is in, like, you have to pay attention. You have to have the detail to see what they're doing. Repetition of this expression, no true American, over and over again. There is also sort of a theme of, like, Americanness. I think, if I can make a guess, the greed and cowardice on display in America right now, okay, myself included. I don't know what I should be doing, but probably more than complaining on YouTube, okay? But I got to protect my family and my dogs and all that stuff. I'm not able to quite go on general strike. That cowardice and then the greed that's ruling in America, that therefore ends up ruling a lot of the world. It's maybe that's why there's so much America in here. These strings are descending, and these funky open strings, and just, it's a beautiful song. Blood on the Boulders. This is where the album really kicks in for me, because those first two tracks are great, and the third one's totally different, and I'm just like, like an opening 3-song suite like this, it's awesome. Like, you really have to love when you have an opening 3-song suite, and it's sort of this dynamic and different. And what he said in this Apple Music interview was that he was happy with the simplicity of the groove. And that's the thing. There's such a simple groove. This is not timekeepery. You're not sitting there thinking about time. You're just thinking about this space with this piano and these like it's just got all this space and this line with the guitar and the piano going up, and the drums are super muted and it sounds like a march. But with how dark this album is, it sounds like a death march. Like you sort of feel like, okay, I know it takes place in California, but I feel like this is like a scene in Breaking Bad where, like, they always drive out to the desert to like kill people and stuff. I feel like it's somebody being driven out to the desert and kind of slowly walking, and Airman Trout's like, stand by the boulder. I don't want to do this. And if I say I don't want to do this, it means you'll think I'm a likable character. I probably should wear a hat if I'm this bald in the sun. It's terrible skincare. You know what I'm saying? But anyways, I don't think that's what it actually is. All the houses in this country are built like shit, drywall. If I could put my fist through it if I wanted to. It's true. A lot of houses in America are really built poorly because they're built to be built as cheaply as possible and then sold for as much as possible. Also, I don't know if this is a reference to The Last Jedi, where the character Rose says, looking at all the opulence of the gambling planet, I wish I could put my fist through this beautiful place. It sounds a little bit like that. The California sun on my face, the drugs, they fogged her brain. In a weird way, this feels like a response to, and it's right behind me. I'm going to grab it. I can pause. I'm not going to edit, but I am going to pause. It sort of reminds me, uh, in a way, of Smile by the Beach Boys, or the Smile Sessions, the bit that came after Pet Sounds. I don't know if this is on purpose, but this feels like it's a story of westward expansion. The blood on the boulders makes me think of westward expansion. This album, Smile itself, is sort of a fascinating case of like almost a concept album, but it devolves or evolves into multiple different themes. So it's sort of about expansionism in America, and then it becomes about health food, and then it becomes about elements. It's a very confusing album by a very conflicted person. But this is sort of, to me, this feels like a song that's kind of like a sad version of that westward expansion. And it might be just their experience touring. But there is the line, Brian is getting interviewed on television telling a story from his childhood. I assume that's Brian Wilson, because any band that knows, any band that's making chambery rock and roll that's really great and complicated, I assume that they worship at the altar of Brian Wilson, like most of us do. And you know, Brian Wilson does have a lot of terrible stories about his childhood. This droning bridge, this changing siren of a guitar, and the body bounced on the horseback, and where they worked, and how they slept, and who they effed, and what they ate, and how they killed. This feels to me like it's a settler story. We return to the scene, blood on the boulders. Feels like it's a settler story, but then mixed in with almost like, I think they said interview somewhere, like true crime. You know, like it almost feels like it's like a true crime analysis of westward expansion. So it could be talking about a settler, a generic settler in the American West who had to kill somebody, or it could be about a serial killer who takes people out to the desert. Just a little side note here. I always watch movies when I'm exercising and I'm listening to music. So I watch a movie on mute and I listen to the music there. I happen to be watching the sequel to the movie Airplane. It's called Airplane 2, the sequel. And I'm just going to drop a couple quotes because they are funny. and I don't think they really match, but there's this great line where this character sits down and someone says, "Are you all right?" He says, "I'm fine. I don't want to talk about it." And then he says, "Well, I'm all right. I guess my problem is my entire life." I just happen to like that lyric. Anyways, goes back to this original jam, The California Sun Is Not For Me. You know, these songs back to back feel to me like it must be hard being from Brighton, being from England, and going to Japan and going to America and all these cultural differences. You know, all these young kids, we don't talk about it enough. Like, touring is tough. Touring is crazy. Could you imagine being like 19 to 26 years old and not really having traveled that much and having to go and like travel and see all these people? Fieldworks 1, harpsichord and keyboard and guitar, kind of a stop and start beat here, a nasally sung verse. The horns here remind me of Beirut, how Beirut uses horns, which is about as high compliment as you can give music for using horns. It gets louder and louder into this crescendo and just fell into it. And then Fieldworks 2, the relationship between these songs is not clear to me. I feel like if I sat with this album longer, I would do it. But hey, you know, I'm a music critic. The big bummer about being a music critic is sometimes you don't even give yourself enough time to have a waffle Doug moment. So there's things I might miss. Feel free to tell me in the comments. This droning guitar, this is actually where I got into the moon-shaped pool feel, because the percussion on here, the rhythm on here feels like the Burn the Witch, the beginning with those kind of like string sounds. I forgot what it's like at the bottom of the hill. Can you remind me? Really ominous lyric. I'm evil too. So evil is a preoccupation of this album, but it's just not quite as cohesive as I thought it was going to be. Really lush guitars here, and layers, and these strings are crashing, and the Philip Glass style notes. And according to what they said in Apple, I just think this is a funny line here. They were going to have a lot of guitar sounds, but they replaced them with harpsichord sounds because, quote, it sounded a bit too much like U2. It sounded like The Edge, the guitarist of U2. So we had to take the edge off. Funny. Cro-Magnon, man, this right here is just the crazy moment on the album. Just this weird, funny, cute jam. Again, sort of in the Burn the Witch style, unsettling. So Bernard Herrmann is the most famous before John Williams and Danny Elfman and Michael Ciccone, all the people, all the people who do music now. Like there was a name in movie music composition, and that was Bernard Herrmann, and he did Citizen Kane, but he also did all of the Hitchcock movies, and this has that kind of Bernard Herrmann psycho vertigo feel. And this is where it felt to me like a continuation of the Viagra Boys de-evolution theme. Even the music sort of reminds me of Devo in a way. These droning, anxious sounds, the doubled voice, this cute, fun chorus, this whole verse about anxiety. And then before the bridge gets all jammy and spacey, and finally the drummer allows himself to drum a little bit more, but I'm not going to complain about that because it's really hard to drum. I believe I said before, I think Buddy Miles for the Band of Gypsies with Jimi Hendrix. Amazing, amazing singer and drummer at the same time. And like singing in unison, and the bridge is noisy and drummy, and then the outro is haunting high singing, so much with the same line over and over again. I frame my life in the bones that I have left. That's that kind of gory body stuff that's in here. More about murder and human stupidity, and Cro-Magnon as a cuboid man, predator and prey alive, open every hour through the night, the petrol sign. So like it's tying together sort of base human nature with modern technological life. But Cro-Magnon man lacks the wherewithal to influence the rest. How many times can you dream of the mist above the crest? Over and over again, and tying it together with plastic bottles. And he said in a interview that he was actually going through some secondhand store, and he found a book on sort of early primitive life, primitive human life. And I'm guessing it's this book, Early Man. This book's great. It's kind of all about that. And I can imagine if you were an artist, and you're reading about Homo erectus, don't laugh. You're reading about Homo erectus, and you're reading about Cro-Magnons and how they lived and what they hunted and how they were, and you compare that to now, it makes sense that would be a subject of music. My favorite line from Airplane 2, there's a computer crash. It's thematically linked. There's a computer crash, and the person and the pilot has too much faith in the computer, right? So someone comes up and tells the pilot about the computer crashing that's going to make the it's actually a space shuttle, that's going to make the aircraft crash. Captain, we have a computer foul up. What do you suggest? The captain sits back and says, run it through the computer. Is that not our current state? When your computer breaks, what's the first thing you do? You run to a computer to tell you why your computer broke. Next track is Cowards. That's the title track, the importance. This was the song where Ollie said that this was his favorite because you just jump in and you wouldn't even know it's a Squid song. Nice little warm jam after the kind of thin verse, the horns and the drums. Everything just gets so warm in here. It's so nice to have an album where the dynamics are primarily between coldness and warmth as opposed to just loud and quiet. Shit, that's really cool. Sorry, I didn't write that down. I just thought of that right now. I'm just going to say it again and have a sip of coffee because I'm proud of that. It's really nice to have an album where the dynamics are between cold and warm versus between just loud and quiet. I love these muted trumpets that just get used just so sparingly, and it matches this high voice in the back and these droning guitars and little pocket jam. It feeds from the last song all about plastic, polythene bags never go away, us dogs and rats will never escape. And it's a fascinating idea of sort of us. There's sort of a whole theme now I'm thinking about it of human beings just being meat, and like human beings like glorifying, disgracing humanity, I guess we could call it. So like de-elevating. So like humans are a higher form of, we are the highest form of humanity. We are much better than the Cro-Magnons. We are the highest form of life. We are much more sophisticated by dogs and rats. Yet through our cowardice and our evil and our reliance on technology, we end up making ourselves just meat, like just the same as dogs and rats and Cro-Magnons. So there's a theme here that is actually pretty consistent now that I think about it. I'm not going to redo the video though, because it does go off in those other areas as well. And the way he sings beyond the castle walls and the thinness of his voice, beyond the garage doors, I will say his lyricism, or their lyricism, I don't know if he writes all the lyrics, maybe it's a Rush thing and some other dude or lady writes the lyrics, or NB. With the pellets down, we walk around the town. Like, it's not quite clear what he's talking about. Anyways, it's beautiful. And then we get to the song Showtime, which is like a little funk jam, maybe most traditional Squid sounding song. You know, it's like if Red Hot Chili Peppers didn't suck. And they didn't always suck. Okay, the Red Hot Chili Peppers have always sucked, but they've also done things that don't suck. And they used to do a lot more things that didn't suck before. Kind of rumbling bass, funky drums, guitar playing, just for voice. I've seen Red Hot Chili Peppers 3 times in concert, and I own 5 of their albums. So if I sound like a hater, I'm also a lover. Breaks into this kind of shuffle chorus with strings. This just like, you could be a footnote, and there's like a computery blooping and bleeping jam, which makes you realize that, like, how much this album has relied on strings and harpsichords, and like how much, because that's the thing, post-punk is like just rock and roll with like one extra element, and the one extra element is usually some kind of synthesizer-y sort of thing. Here it's all these acoustic instruments, and this really brings that out, and it speeds up. And I'm really thankful, because I was getting towards the end of my workout, you know, a 45-minute workout on a Saturday morning, you know. I'm doing it, you know. Middle age is tough. You got to work super hard to maintain, you know, and it speeds up, and it's great because it got me going faster, you know. Really good for a workout. In the middle of Airplane 2, they had a sign that said "Don't panic," and then that sign broke, and then there's a sign next to it that says "Okay, panic." Hilarious. Then breaks into almost like a driving jam, and then I found out what the song's about. I never would have guessed this. He said it's about Andy Warhol. Andy Warhol. Warhol. Andy Warhol. If you get that joke, tell me in the comments. Give you a little high five. Andy Warhol. The lyrics tackle exploitation, ego, and abuse. So then I reread the lyrics. Can I just watch, observe the things I'm not, a carnival in silver, bodies intertwined? So this makes sense, because this is Andy Warhol, who in his factory would have, like, you know, obviously all these silver balloons. That was one of the things he would sell. A carnival in silver, bodies intertwined. And his movies were often just a lot of sex scenes, a lot of very sexy, raunchy, kind of dirty, vulgar stuff. I hide behind the blinds, hit me, hit me. And so it feels, you know, that makes sense. He's just kind of watching. He's just kind of a watcher. But then, and this is not on Lyric Genius. You got to come to Professor Skye to get this kind of analysis, because this didn't sit right with me. This doesn't seem like this could possibly just be from the perspective of Andy Warhol. Andy Warhol. It is a little bit in the beginning. Warhol. It is a little bit in the beginning, but then at the end it switches to Andrea Feldman. I had to do a little bit of research to figure this out. But Andrea Feldman was a member of Andy Warhol's superstars, right? Andy Warhol invented the term superstar to describe women like Andrea Feldman, like, Edie Sedgwick, okay? Like Candy Darling. And she starred in a few of his movies, like Trash and Heat, which you can see on YouTube. It's great. You can see nudity on YouTube. It's wild. I'm a straight guy, but Joe D'Alessandro is like naked in most of those movies. He's a handsome dude. So he was a superstar. So she was like a star of a few of his movies. And this abuse term is interesting. In an interview in 1972 with Greg Ford in Interview magazine, which ironically was published by Andy Warhol, Andy Warhol, she said, "They just throw you in front of a camera. They don't care what you look like. And they just use you and abuse you and step on you, and they don't pay you anything. And I'm very depressed about the whole thing, because I'm a damn good actress, and I've been brought down by Warhol, and I've been mistreated by them. And Paul Morrissey, the director, Paul Morrissey told me I was the best actress he ever had." So it's a sad story. It's going to get sadder. But that's the idea of abuse, that Warhol would take these people and just kind of like exploit them for their youth, exploit them for their dynamism and their self-destruction, and then just kind of move on. The song's called Showtime. She had a thing called Showtime where she would strip by jumping on top of a table and call it Showtime. Okay? But this is somebody who never celebrated her 25th birthday because she jumped out of a window. Okay? And that's what the end of the song is. Falling fast onto 12th Street, cross in hand, and I just laughed. She jumped out of a window, or jumped off the roof of a 14-story building, actually, holding onto a cross. which is weird because she wasn't Christian, jumped off of a cross and was just laughing and saying, I'm going to make the big time. Like she's going to finally be a star. So that's what this is about. It's about Andrea Feldman. Did I say the S word? Unaliving herself and this little jam with drums and guitar. Oh, it's a beautiful song. The album ends with Well Met, which I thought was a play on Walmart. I mean, well met is like a British term, well met, like when you do a good job, you meet a challenge well, well met, that's a thing they say. The keeper had to be good, and he was. It's one of those things they say, and I happened to be watching a commercial on Walmart while this song came on, so maybe. But I don't think so. It's this idea of these little rattling sounds and these odd discordant chords and there's like the slide guitar comes in, almost breezy, almost like Hawaiian style, the slow intro, so many rhythmic moments here. If you don't like this album, well, first of all, why are you still watching this analysis? It means you want to like this album, so props to you. The way that the synthesizers and I don't know if they're clavichords or harpsichords, whatever it is, the way, like the synthesizers are kind of automated rhythm and the clavichords, there's so many nice layers. And then the way the horns come in, the horns are like this warm blanket that always warms you in this album when you need it the most. And it's a female voice singing. I don't even know who it is. And then eventually the male singer joins in and it kind of falls apart and restarts at 3:30 and at 3 minutes and 30 seconds, and it's this beautiful ending song with all these rhythms, all this warmth, all this coldness, all things, everything that's happening in the album all coming together. Waffle Doug. You tell me, what's your Waffle Doug? Maybe this can be your Waffle Doug moment where you realize Squid really are that good of a band. All three of these bands that I'm mentioning as the big three, and I know I'm forgetting Eyelash Mites. I just, listen, I saw their set at the Windmill and I thought that they just weren't that great. Okay, so besides Eyelash Mites, these are the big three, I think, for a reason, and that skill came off and the power came off in their early works, and it's beautiful to see them grow. It really is. Apparently the song is about Dunwich, place in England. Hey, listen, I'm from New England, so most of every town where I grew up was either some damn place in England or a really cool name from the local, from the people who lived there before Europeans came. So anyways, breaking off and falling in. Apparently Dunwich was a town that sunk, and it's very famous in England, so it's a environmental theme. What's nice about this whole idea of de-evolution of humanity through cowardice and greed that leads us to a state of evil, either active evil or passive acceptance of evil, which in and of itself is evil. As that joke that's going around says, there's a special word for Nazis who did not actively support Hitler or his actions, but just went along because of economic self-interest. That special word was Nazi. The fact that basically all Americans are turning into Nazis by that. Anyways, like the parallels there of those things, and then the greed and the cowardice that's destroying our social lives, that's destroying our society, that's destroying the fabric of empathy and love that we could potentially have, as opposed to tribal nonsense and genocide, which is the world that we're barreling towards. The environmental devastation's the same thing. It's all greed and cowardice. It's just that combination. This has the most epic feel at the end. These arpeggiated strings and these big sound, just like the blown out horns, and they come in and they're thumping with this insistent harpsichord and this great percussion outro. It sounds like the intro, and it does that thing that I love, which is where you end up like, if you listen to the album on repeat, it sounds perfect, like it just leads from one to the next. These are my Patreons. I've decided I am going to buy this album. I wasn't going to buy this album, but I am going to buy this album. I don't know if I'm a big enough deal that I could ask Warp Records to send it to me for free, but I'll buy it anyways. What the hey, Gotta support artists. So Patreons help me to buy money and diapers. Still buying diapers. I got the 6-month-old. It's almost her 6-month birthday. And I got the 2.5-year-old who I'm going to have to go see. And the first thing my wife is going to say is, did you take out the waffle dough? And I'm going to say, Waffle Doug. Waffle Doug did it. Oh, yeah. What team do I support now? Fulham, baby. Fulham. That's my team. I'm the most passionate Fulham fan. Why? Because I think the obscenity of their wealth reflects the obscenity of the wealth of the Premier League. And as somebody who supports Ligue 1 in France, a poor, pitiful league where we can never keep anybody who has any salary whatsoever, I think supporting Fulham is the best is the best way to celebrate and criticize Premier League at the same time. Also, Charlie Wayne of Black Country New Road went to a game once and showed a picture. I just said, forget it. I'm all about Fulham. Sorry, Brighton. I sometimes ask Patreons if they'd like a shout-out. Harlan T, Zach, The Cinnabun, Ioza94, Rippling Sun, and Josh Logan. Now, he happened to mention, I don't encourage this because I'm not always going to shout out your band, but he happened to say that Squid inspired, he saw a show at Iceland Airwaves, and he saw Squid play a show and inspired him to start his own band. And that's the band I'm going to send you to. Check out the links in the comments. They're called BKPM. And there's just one album on Bandcamp called Live at Upprasin. Upprasin. And I listened to it this morning. And it's great. And it's all in Icelandic, which is great because, all I know is sugar cubes and cigaros and Bjork, And I like, it's a nice language. And if you like that early kind of Squid sound with the cool timekeeper-y time changes and like the bratty singing and all that, it's not an imitation, but it's in that same kind of style. So check it out. But it's all in Icelandic. Like my favorite Bjork lyric. Chairman Mao, please make love to me. Chairman Mao, please make love to me. I don't care what it says. That's what she's singing. All right. Well, time to go work on that waffle Doug. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I had a fun time making it. How long did this video end up being? 46 minutes. Man, it's hilarious because my class sessions are 50 minutes. I cannot help it. I naturally go to this time. All right. The homework is up on Brightspace. I will see you at next class. Should I start saying that? Homework is up on Brightspace? That'd be kind of funny. There's the camera. Wait, where is it?